Welcome to the Mac and Fish podcast. Today we're going to discuss the national championship game between Alabama Crimson Tide and the Ohio State Buckeyes. In segment 2, we're going to get into who has the best chance at winning and playing for the national championship in the 2021 football season. Will it be Ohio State, will it be Alabama, or will it be some newcomer like Texas Longhorns?
What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to the Mac and Fish podcast. I'm Coach McKinley Roll, and I'm here with my co-host, Charles Fishbein, better known as Fish. Fish, what's going on?
Got about 80% of me today, man. I don't know if I'll be able to roll like last week.
All right, well, we need the other 20 to show up.
All right.
All right, and we're also here with Corey Long. Corey, what's going on?
Man, I don't know. 80% for me sounds like a pretty good day. So you might get about 63% somewhere there.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
All right.
Carry this one, pal.
Well, we have a great show planned today. Let's hop into our NCAA championship preview, and our championship game preview. Anyone you guys want to start? Talking about Alabama, Ohio State.
Well, last year, I went into the game. I felt very confident in picking LSU, just because you saw it probably about week 5 or 6. They were just so talented, and they were so good on both sides of the ball. This is the first year I remember I can't decide which side I want to go. I mean, I think Alabama's the better team, but I think Justin Fields gives Ohio State the better player of the two quarterbacks. I know Devontae Smith's on the other side, so he's going to make an impact for Alabama. But you saw what Justin Fields did in their last game and how well he played against Clemson and what he brings to the table. He's dynamic, and I think he's going to be a tough out for the Alabama defense. I just think he's able to do so much if he comes back 100%. Now, we don't know how badly he was hurt. Ohio State hasn't really said anything about what his condition's like other than he's going to play. But it's going to be interesting. I mean, Alabama's centers, Landon Dickerson's not going to play. So, Ohio State has a very good D-line. Ohio State has a very good O-line. They're very good up front. And we got to see, Mac Jones, as good as of a quarterback he's been this year, he showed some kinks last week in the first round of the playoffs. He showed that he's not an elite quarterback. He's a very good one, but there was times he got pressured by Notre Dame. And if Ohio State's able to get some pressure on him, it's going to be interesting. He doesn't, like most quarterbacks, he doesn't do well in second and third and long. You notice he's a lot better playing in front of the sticks, where with Fields, it doesn't matter. It could be 3rd and 18. The guy can throw it 80 yards down the field. So I'm interested to see what happens. I don't really have a say either way, like who's going to win. I think that it will stay within the number. I think that I think Alabama's favored by 8.5. I think that's a lot of points, but right now I think it's going to a pretty much evenly matched team. Two teams that are going to play on Monday night.
When was the last time the team with the better quarterback lost in this game? I mean, you can go back. I think you can kind of call Trevor Lawrence and Joe Burrow a push. Joe was obviously having a better season than Lawrence. He had better weapons, but just talent-wise, I mean, they're both going to be number 1 picks. Trevor's probably a little bit more talented, but Joe had so much better weapons-wise, it kind of pushed itself out. I mean, you go back, Lawrence wins the year before. I guess you can go back to Jacob Coker. Wasn't as good as Deshaun Watson. So that would be like 5 years ago. And before that, you always go back to maybe Colt McCoy wasn't as good as Greg McElroy wasn't as good as Colt McCoy, and that was like 2010. Most of the time, the best quarterback's going to win the game. Injured ribs or not, there's no doubt Justin Fields is a lot better than Mac Jones. Mac Jones had a hell of a year. He's got a Heisman Trophy winner at receiver, but he still has to get him the football. And that's going to be, Ohio State's going to have a lot to say about that. That was Trevor Lawrence's issue. It wasn't, Trevor's lack of talent that had him struggling against Ohio State. It was the fact that his guys couldn't hold up. Couple things stand out for me with Ohio State. Obviously, the quarterback, Trey Sermon's playing at a really high level. Gives you a running back that, I mean, he had 300 plus yards in the Big Ten game, had almost 200 against Clemson. He can really be a deciding factor here. He gives Fields a really capable backfield mate to keep some pressure off of him. Ohio State's great on both sides of the line. Their offensive line is just massive. Their defensive line is, defensive line is huge. They're quick off the edge. If they can get to Mac Jones consistently, which I don't see any reason why they couldn't, I think Alabama's they're gonna have some issues because they're not a shutdown defense. And I'm leaning towards Ohio State. I think earlier in the week when I went on local radio, I said I thought Alabama would win like 34-27. I thought it was going to be a really competitive game late in the game. And I still think it will be, but I'm leaning more towards Ohio State right now. I think they've got the better players at the positions you need to have them at right now.
I think this game comes down to a couple different things. I do think that Alabama is the better team as far as if you look at as far as overall talent, maybe comprised. I think that Nick Saban is the advantage as far as in the coaching department. But like you said, Corey, when I look at the quarterback matchup, I like Fields. Now, that's going to be dependent upon Justin Fields' health, right? I mean, if Justin Fields is at 50% or a little bit lower than that, then we may be having a different conversation. But Ohio State is a little bit better, I believe, as far as in the line of scrimmage. They're better at the quarterback position. The only question mark I have is was last week their Super Bowl, right? Was last week their emotional game? Because remember, they were everyone picked against them, and they had something to play for, and it was hard to come and get a team up twice, 2 times in a row. Yes, this is a championship game, but I just didn't know if they exerted all of their energy towards that win last week over Clemson. So I think this is going to be interesting to watch. But I'll be honest with you, I like Ohio State. When I look at it, I like Fields. I like the line of scrimmage play. I give that advantage to Ohio State. And I think it's going to be a great game. I do think, like you said, Fish, that line is a little, I think it's going to be very close. I think it go either way, but I think we're going to have an enjoyable championship game and one that I think should be interesting. It's going to come down to the last couple kind of plays and possessions. But I'm going with Ohio State.
The one thing I'll jump in real quick too, Corey brought in, or I think you brought up, the experience of Nick Saban and everything. And, he's one of the best coaches that's ever coached, if not the best. And he does a great job of getting his teams prepared. It's very interesting to see what, Ryan Day's done a very good job at Ohio State too. He's a young coach.
Mm-hmm.
He's only his second year as a head coach. He seems to like these challenges. Last week, he wanted to prove something to Clemson. And I think as a head coach, he replaced Urban Meyer, and he wants to prove he belongs alongside Urban Meyer, that he wasn't just handed the keys to an expensive car, I think he wants if he wins a championship next week, not saying that there haven't been other coaches that have won that aren't that good, but he wants to put his name among the elite coaches. And this is one step forward if he could do it in year 2, considering he's already been to they've made the playoffs last year. So I think this is a statement game for Ryan Day. And how many, you could say, oh, Ohio State's going to get back and this and that. It's not so easy. Everybody can say, oh, they'll be back. Listen, we'll discuss it later. I mean, Ohio State loses a lot next year. And
Mhm.
I know Corey's going to tell me they got all this talent coming in and this and that. It's not just about talent. It's having the right pieces.
Correct.
Alabama, let's exclude them. They're the one outlier in this whole thing. They'll probably be back there next year, even though they lose their whole roster. But this is a chance. You wonder how many chances Ryan's going to get. These are going to be his best two teams that he's going to have probably over the next 5 years. If you take the last 2 years and the next 3 years, these two teams that he's had will probably be the height of the talent level that he's had at all positions. Quarterback. I mean, he had a great running back last year. He has a great one this year. So you got to see, is this, maybe he doesn't get another shot, like this, but we'll see. I think this is a statement game. And it's an important game, I think, for Ryan Day and Ohio State.
No, Fish, you're absolutely right. Sometimes, and I'm guilty of it as well. Sometimes you overlook that fact, and you don't want to give Ryan Day, Coach Day, his flowers. But I mean, that machine has continued to roll even after Urban Meyer, what Coach Meyer has done and left that program. But you're right. I mean, it's not easy to get back, and there's a lot of pieces that have to fit. Is there another Justin Fields? Justin Fields is a generational type talent. Do they have that at quarterback next year? I highly doubt that. So they're going to take a step back. And let's remember, even with Alabama, Alabama's not there every year either. They're continually a top 10 program. But when they lose their pieces, they take steps back as well. So
not much. But the one thing about Ohio State,
but it only takes a little bit though.
I mean, you got to look. If Fields hadn't gone to Ohio State, they're probably last year starting Tate Martell. And I can tell you this right now. I don't care how much talent they had on that team last year. Tate would have lost 4 games, as talented as they were. And that's the thing is that quarterback, we've seen guys that are highly rated that are 5-star.
Tate Martell.
They would have.
Tate Martell couldn't start at Dwyer. Right?
They didn't have anybody else. Listen,
they would have somebody in the study and found somebody else. They had Justin Fields.
They had Justin Fields. If they didn't land Justin,
he was going to start Tate Martell.
Oh, all right. Tell me
what you just went out and got another.
All right, tell me what your magic ball tells you that they were going to get, because I go by facts, all right, or I go by reality. The reality is they had Justin Fields. They got lucky.
No, I need a quarterback. That was it. He would have started somebody.
What happened to all right? But what happened to Fields?
But it wouldn't have been.
What happened to Fields?
Tate Martell would still be on
we know.
College roster somewhere.
All right, wait a second. We know they were.
Martell is hanging out at the
Cleveland. Corey.
Cheap scotch. That's
Corey.
What he's doing right now.
All right, Corey.
So he wasn't one step away from being Ohio State's quarterback to go for drinking cheap scotch at the Cleveland. That doesn't happen in one year. You don't go from Ohio State quarterback to looking for.
All right. Hey, listen.
Broads down on South Beach. All right.
All right. They had.
He'd have found another quarterback.
Who? All right. Who would they have found?
Let's be honest and let's just say you wouldn't.
All right. Who would they have found? Because you know who all the quarterbacks are in college football right now. They weren't getting Trevor Lawrence.
If they didn't have had another Justin Fields, let's not go ridiculous.
Yeah. All right. Maybe they get lucky and find a Mac Jones, but they weren't going to find.
That's my idea. They would have found a quarterback.
But who? It's not like these kids.
Like some sort of a game manager.
All right. You act like these kids grow on trees. There's 5 great quarterbacks. There's 5. There's 5 great quarterbacks in college football.
I'm not sitting there saying they would have found another Justin Fields. They wouldn't have started Tate. You're going from one extreme to another. You're telling me.
Well, I'm just going off of what.
Twice is ridiculous by saying that.
I'm just saying that's what they had on the. That's what they had on their.
Drinking. Drinking pop.
That's what they had on their roster. Period.
Ohio State because he wasn't.
That's what they had on their roster.
Ryan Day saw him play. He realized I can't put that guy out on the field.
Well, that's what they had on their roster.
We're not talking about Kirby Smart where you would have played Stetson Bennett. He realized right away the first time he saw him, this kid ain't playing with my name on. I don't care. I'll play quarterback myself before I put my name on this kid.
Yeah.
So So I mean, that's what I'm saying. You go from one extreme to another. But yeah, I get your point.
Yeah,
but
I know.
your point
These kids
you're
just
trying
grow
to
on trees.
over-exaggerate your point.
They grow on trees. Maybe they could start James Blackman and they would have won. You know, like these kids just grow on trees.
Nah, they
Like
definitely
I said,
don't.
I get your point. You're just over-exaggerating your point.
I'm just saying that's what they had on their roster. I mean, you could tell me, hey, who they would have brought in, but that's what they had on their roster. And they knew they needed a better quarterback. And luckily for them, Georgia, decided to let that kid go. And that's it. They got lucky. They needed don't tell me they didn't get a little luck that Fields fell into their lap. I mean, that's
they got
luck.
tons of luck. I mean, they had tons of luck in that aspect.
Well,
Absolutely.
I'm just saying those kids
Go
don't
back
grow
to
on
what
trees.
the transfer market was when Justin Field transferred to see who else was out there. But
I think both of you guys make good points. I mean, let's be honest. The two generational quarterbacks, right, in college football right now are Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. And Fish is right; they don't grow on trees. But Corey, you have a point as well that they would have brought in a quarterback. Who that would have been, we don't know, but they would have brought somebody in. But even that player is still not going to be Justin Fields.
Yeah,
That's Fish's point.
And I concede that. I'm not saying it brought another Justin Fields. I'm saying, we're going from Justin Fields to Edward Scissorhands as your quarterback. Like there's a place in there in the middle that let's get to that spot. Let's be honest.
I'd say they landed Derek King. As good as Derek King is, they wouldn't have been.
Correct.
Okay,
they wouldn't have been as good as.
They probably wouldn't have been the same spot. I mean, Ohio State. You look. I mean, not counting this kind of weirdo season, they haven't lost less than 11 games since. I mean, they've lost less than 11 games. I mean, they've won less than 11 games.
But it's been like that since I was a kid. I mean, John Cooper won 11 games.
2008.
Yeah, John Cooper used to win 11.
Less than 11 games once since 2008, and that was the year they won 10 games. So I mean, it's not like they've been so good. I mean, like you go back to 2002. This is like a 20-year run that they're on. Well, they pretty much dominated this conference. As long as they're playing in the Big Ten, they're winning 10 games.
No doubt. But I'm just saying, it's like there's a difference between winning 10 games.
The difference between 10 and 12 is finding a player. So
it's finding a quarterback.
Yeah, and that's
the quarterback. Period.
That's your difference between 10 and 12.
And it's a big step up from 10 to 12. I think I've always 10 is the benchmark of a good program. If you can consistently win 10 a year, the coach at Michigan State he won a lot of 10, had a lot of 10 win ball years where he won 10 games. I always thought he was a really good coach. Getting from 10 to 12, and that's basically you're playing for championships, is the quarterback position. It's really the one position that changes everything. You're a good program. And that's what, Ohio State's had Trevor Lawrence. I'm not Trevor Lawrence. They've had Fields. They've had the kid with the Redskins that went in the first round that's been benched. But they've had NFL prospects at that position. Now, I'm not saying that got
1 year though.
What?
They had Haskins for 1 year. I mean, really, the benchmark for them was the year that they won the title, where they went through 3 quarterbacks. I mean, Cardinal Jones, as much of a monster as he would have been in another program, was third string and didn't even take any snaps. And he runs off, and he runs them off because they have Zeke at running back, and they had a lot of other parts. And that's kind of my thing. They've got dudes. They're not a team that's sitting around their quarterback reliant. They got a lot of great players at a lot of positions.
But it's not.
And they've had that for a very long time now.
But
that's not just an urban thing. That was a Tressel thing. That was a John Cooper thing.
I understand that.
Tremendous talent at that program for 30 years.
No, there's no doubt. But that's the one position that puts you over the top. It is. Unless you're Alabama, where they have such great parts everywhere else that they have a game manager. There's just not a lot of programs. I mean, Ohio State won with Craig Krenzel, but not a lot of those guys win anymore. We've talked about it. You need an elite quarterback to win these games now. It just that's how it's become. Yeah, it just has. I mean, you go look. Most of the guys from Mariota to Jameis to Trevor Lawrence to Deshaun Watson, these guys are all first-round picks. And they're all playing for titles now. It wasn't like that, 20 years ago. The game's changed, and you need that elite piece at that position.
And the only team to win a title without the elite quarterback in the playoff era is Ohio State.
Well, good luck trying to keep doing it.
You know, and I mean, it just they had a big kid at quarterback, but I mean, I wouldn't call Cardell Jones elite. You know,
No.
he was a guy that was coming off the bench that happened to take well coached, took over a loaded team.
Yeah, that team also got hot at the right moment. You know,
and Jones was a first round draft pick too.
No, he wasn't.
No, he wasn't. No, he went third. No, third round. No,
he still got drafted. We're talking about a guy that still got drafted in the NFL.
Yeah, no, I mean
he was the thing.
It wasn't like he was
play. Like he was headed to the transfer portal the next year if he done. He was third string. He was a third string quarterback.
But Corey, he had a ton of talent. Talent.
Yeah,
but he was still a third string quarterback. It wasn't like he was on their radar. They needed two guys to go down with season-ending injuries.
How many seasons was Urban Meyer at Ohio State?
Well, Urban was when did he get there? 2012, maybe.
All right.
Yeah.
So hold on one second.
He was there in 12. Yeah, he left Florida in 10. Took a year off. Worked with me at ESPN. Then he went there in 12. They go 12-0 when they weren't eligible for anything. Then they go 12-0, 12-2, then 14.
So he was at Ohio State for 7 years. This is probably one of the best coaches in college football in our lifetime, probably a top 5 coach. Yeah. He won one title at Ohio State. One. Tressel won one.
Yeah, with a third string quarterback.
And Tressel won one. Like, it's not that easy to win titles at Ohio State. It's not Alabama.
No.
You know, I think they've got a lot of built-in advantages. But they also don't always have the same athletes as the Southern teams. They have to have that right. Ezekiel Elliott was a Southern type player. They had those guys. I've been watching them forever. I mean, they're a great program. It's probably one of the best programs to coach at. But with Urban Meyer, they had one title. You know, you're saying, oh well, it's that they'll just
won in 2012 too. They weren't eligible. Wow. That wasn't Urban's fault. That was them.
Hey, if I was 6'4", I would have had a model for a wife.
I forget what they did in 12 to screw up.
Yeah.
All right. Let's pivot a little bit. Talking about our potential championship teams or teams to be on the lookout for in 2021. Teams that you guys like. I'm gonna go first. As far as who returns, I think we were all in the consensus that Georgia probably brings back the most talent coming back. But like I told you guys before, I think it's very dependent upon how Kirby Smart allows that offense to take off. Yes, they'll have the quarterback, but they'll have a lot of talent. I mean, you see, it's evident that they've gotten better in the trenches tremendously. They're going to have a great defense. They're going to have a big offensive line. They're going to have the running back. They're going to have the speed in the secondary and a receiver and a running back. They're going to have talent there. And they should run through the East. But I just, I still question that offense. It all comes down to their offense and that ability. I think another team to look out for is going to be Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher. We spoke a little bit about that last week. I think Jimbo Fisher is building a monster there. They're going to make a lot of noise. Alabama is going to take a step back. Alabama, I know everyone's going to say, oh, well, Nick Saban just reloads, which he does. But remember, he's losing his offensive coordinator, and they'll get somebody in there who will be just as good or better. But there's just so many guys they have to replace. And they're going to have to replace guys with guys that have not played. And that's going to make a difference. You can't, you have talent plus experience. It's usually bodes well for you, but they're going to take a step back. So those are my two teams that I'll look for. I think Clemson is going to be a question mark without Lawrence, and they're losing some guys to the draft. Oklahoma is going to be pretty salty. You saw what they have in Rattler at quarterback. and then they have this talent coming in, and that defense is going to be even better next year. So Oklahoma has a shot because I don't think anyone's going to challenge them in the Big 12, even with Texas, and Coach Sarkisian coming there. And LSU question mark is out. They had a great recruiting class the last 2 years, last couple years, but they had a tremendous drop off. So my teams to be on the lookout for as far as the national title conversation are going to be University of Georgia, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma. Those going to be your championship's going to come out of one of those three teams, in my opinion.
I think Georgia's the best team of all the ones returning, as long as I think they've got the quarterback. I think JT Daniels is good. They can throw the ball downfield they'll throw the ball downfield with their bad quarterbacks. Now they got a good one they can throw the ball downfield with. And I think it'll open up the elements of their game they like to. If you want to run the ball as much as they want to and run it so effectively, having a real threat at quarterback will make a huge difference. Even if he's not a superstar, JT Daniels is a much higher in quarterback than one that they've had that team in a while. I think he's better than Jake Fromm, who they almost won a title with. So beyond that, I get, Oklahoma. I get Alabama's going to take a step back, but when you're already 6 steps ahead of everybody, taking a step back doesn't really matter much. They're going to be there. I actually think the SEC West is going to be a lot more competitive next year. I think A&M is going to be a little better. I think LSU is going to be a lot better. I just think I think Ole Miss is actually going to end up probably upsetting at least one of the teams that we think has a really good shot at a championship. I just think the SEC West is going to be a much more difficult out than it was this year. It wasn't very good this year, and a lot of it outside of A&M and Bama, there wasn't a lot there. Miss me on Oklahoma. I don't trust them. Don't like them. Don't trust them. Texas kind of interests me though. I'm not going to lie. They got a lot of returning parts. I think, if they can find the right thing at quarterback, they've got a stud. Bijan Robinson is just big time as a running back. That's been, when Texas has had a big time running back, those have been their best teams. And they got a big time back. Their coaching situation with Sarkisian, we're going to see what kind of staff that he has around him. That's a big question mark. I feel a little excited. There are some, there is a little bit more. The top teams all have a little bit of question marks going into next year. Clemson, I think me and Fish talked about this regularly. I think Clemson's they look like a 2-3 loss team next year. And the thing is, I don't think quarterback is their issue. I think the quarterback spot they're fine at. I think they're just not good at a lot of other positions. I think they've missed on some recruiting. They haven't hit on certain guys, and I think it's going to come back to it's going to cost them a little bit. They'll still be, compete for the ACC. Obviously, they're still a high-end ACC team, but I don't see them as a team that's going to be a playoff competitor. At least not right now. We're in January, so that's where I am with them. So you threw me out there and put me up against a wall. I'd say Georgia, definitely. I feel like I feel like Ohio State might be there depending on I just don't think the Big Ten's very strong next year. So even if they're not a great team, they might be able to slide through. I'm interested in the West Coast. I feel like the West Coast might have something to offer. USC's got players. They don't have the coach that we like, but damn, they're good. And Oregon's going to be better. They're probably a year away, but they're going to be better. It's just, it's hard to tell. It's easy just to say that, Alabama will be back there again or something like that. But there's a lot. I think there's a lot to go through this year. I think there's a lot of teams have some question marks, and it's going to be, who fills those in? Who's been recruiting well enough in not only this class, but the class previous to have those guys that can jump in.
Yep. I'm going to, you guys we talked about Georgia. You got to go and look at when you're checking off all the boxes. They check off a lot of boxes for a program. And we can say, yeah, until they do it, but this is Kirby's best team.
I agree. This is definitely.
I mean, you check off the boxes. George Pickens, probably the best receiver in the SEC next year, one of them. Darnell Washington has a chance to be the best tight end. Tyreek Stevenson may be the best defensive back in that conference next year. JT Daniels is probably the best returning quarterback. They got a very good offensive and defensive line. Like, this is a team that doesn't have many holes. The only hole they have is in that trophy case, and that they haven't won the championship yet, which, I mean, you look in the SEC East, they're probably going to have an easy ride next year. Florida's going to come back a little. Tennessee has their problems. I mean, it's not like Georgia's in the West, and I don't believe their schedule is going to have them playing all those West teams next year. So they'll probably have an easier ride. We talk about Alabama. It's easy to just say, hey, they're going to be there because they've done it for so long and Saban's such a great coach. But at some point, you start a freshman quarterback. I mean, it's like you're still rolling the dice. We know, as great as freshman quarterbacks are, he's not going to have Najee Harris. And I know they're bringing in great running backs. But remember, Najee Harris wasn't great till this year. It took him time to learn the system at Alabama and become a great like, not all their running backs go to Alabama and hit stride year one. I mean, they have the Sanders kid from Port St. Joe's. That kid hasn't hit his stride yet. Like, their guys don't hit strides all the time. And they've had basically their receivers, how many receivers they had with two of that first year, they were all freshmen. They're all gone now. I mean, Devonta Smith is gone. The other wide receiver that was out this year, Judy's gone. That wide receiver class that they had as a freshman group may be the best of all time on one team. I mean, it's just ridiculous. So I'm not taking anything away from them, but they're going to have to replace three guys on the O-line. Their D-line loses a lot. And remember, this year, with the recruiting, a lot of these kids, we don't know what this year is going to bring with the lack of evaluations. They're taking a lot of guys. We don't know how well they're going to. I mean, I trust Saban and his staff evaluating because they've done such a great job. But if there's a year that guys are going to miss on their freshman class, this is it, because they weren't able to evaluate these kids all the way through like they have in years past. So there's a lot of things going again. If there's one year that Alabama could slip up, it's next year. I think Ohio State, I don't know what the Big Ten brings. I think the Big Ten will be better next year, and Ohio State will lose to somebody and get left out. Clemson, we've talked about them. I think Texas A&M, UGA, and one of Oklahoma or Texas, whoever wins that game this year, Texas has a very good shot at being in the playoffs next year. Herman built a very good roster. I thought they looked great in their bowl game, and they looked like they didn't look like a small weak Texas team. Like, they looked physical in that game. Sarkisian is coming from Alabama, so he's going to probably improve that strength and conditioning program there. They look big and physical. They went after Colorado. And yeah, Colorado wasn't the best team, but they did what they were supposed to. They physically whipped them up front. And I think Texas could be there. If there's a year next year, I think could be that one team that hasn't been in the conversation for a while. Texas could be it. And, LSU, we've seen them. They recruit very well. You got to figure they got to bounce back. I just can't imagine they're as bad. And I agree with Corey. The West next year, I mean, you got Kiffin's going to be in his second year, so they're going to improve from year 1 to 2. Leach is going to improve from year 1 to 2. You saw what Arkansas did. Like, I don't think there's any easy outs next year in that West. Like, you better bring it every week, because even the bottom teams can knock off an Alabama or an Auburn or any of those top level teams. So you're going to have to bring it 10 straight weeks in that conference next year. But I don't know if you guys saw Texas A&M's schedule for next year. They basically have 10 wins written on that schedule before they step on the field. Like you also have to look at schedule. They have a favorable schedule. And if you want to play in the playoffs and stuff, that's, Corey talks about Ohio State and their favorable schedules. You need that. You need a little luck, guys staying healthy, but having that schedule, and, Jimbo always talked about it when he was at Florida State. And that's why Clemson has such an advantage in the ACC. You don't want to have to play, 4 or 5 teams that can beat you every year on your schedule. So it's interesting. I think next year is actually going to be a little more parity in college football than we've had in years past. And I think it'll be a lot more interesting than this Ohio State, Clemson, Alabama guaranteed to be in. But like Corey said, these teams have to play their way out, and we'll see if they do.
Yeah. I mean, with Alabama, when it comes to their recruiting and their class, we know the kids they're bringing in next year, especially in those receiver spots. We look at them; they're all Florida kids. Mm-hmm. They pretty much hit Florida and Texas this year. So however good the top-end kids in Florida and Texas will be how good they are over the next 2 and 3
As good as they are, I don't think they're as good as the group that just left. I don't think there's a Jerry Jeudy in that class. I like Ja'Cory Brooks. I like Ja'Cory Brooks. I like Christian Leary. I like the guys they're bringing in. They're not at the same level.
I don't know. I don't sit around here. I guess I'd say who's going to be good 3 years from now. I mean, because I don't know how these kids are going to perform. I don't know who's going to be throwing the football.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot. It's a lot to say who is or isn't going to be as good as who's there now, because there's always somebody better.
Mm-hmm.
Never forget that.
All right. I'm just saying, like, there ain't too many Jerry Judys coming out of high school that you're landing. I mean,
no.
They've landed. They're landing guys that have been great.
Oh, you know what? There weren't too many Julio Joneses. There weren't too many. They always somehow figure out a way to get another guy
as good as
compared to the last guy.
But as good as Julio was, and I thought he was phenomenal.
Yeah,
he wasn't as productive as Jeudy and Devontae. Like, they played above their talent level.
That was the point. When we talked about, if we're doing this 10 years ago, we're probably saying, God, they ain't going to get another Julio. And now they got 5 more Julios since then.
I don't know about 5 more. I mean, they've had some really.
I don't know about that.
At least 3 more Julios since then.
There ain't two.
They had 3 receivers in the first
round. Old Miss had 2 Julios and they didn't win jack. They had
Hugh Freeze coaching them. But because my point is, hey, they had 3 guys go in the first round last year. They had 3 receivers going in the first round last year, right? 2 or 3.
2 at
so
least.
we didn't expect them to have 3 more going this year in the first. Like, that's the thing. Like, you just don't know until it happens.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Waddle is declared yet, right? He's still, I think, I believe, but he's going to be another guy, if he decides to leave, who will go in the first round, which is extremely impressive.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
it's just amazing what
I think it's unprecedented, that run. Yeah. I don't think at least I haven't seen that many first round draft picks on the same team in the same position.
When Miami had that amazing group, that 2000, 2001 group, it wasn't like 5 years later they had another 8 guys going in the first round. Like,
exactly,
it's incredible.
But I said it back then, like, Miami, when Miami got really good in 2021. Listen, Butch did a phenomenal job, but they had a group of kids come through Dade and Broward and Palm Beach County that haven't come through since.
Yeah,
Vince Wilfork. Since Leonard Taylor's the best D tackle to come out of that area since Vince Wilfork. Mm-hmm. That's 20 years ago. Sean Taylor, there hasn't been another Sean Taylor. Mm-hmm. There hasn't been, you look, Najee Davenport, Willis McGahee, Frank Gore. These guys aren't coming out. You've had Dalvin Cook, but there haven't been those high, they got Hall of Fame type players that all came out in a 2 to 3 year period and ended up on the same team. That's just not, those things don't happen all the time. And it's Alabama's had just one of these historic runs, and at some point it's going to end. It's not going to last forever. Now,
but you look at it. Look what they did this year. They're bringing in 4 of the top 10 in the country. They're probably going to hit on one of those kids. We can probably must say that one of those kids are probably going to be a first round draft pick.
There's no question. But listen, the Fab Five, as great as they were, Duke has signed 5 better players on paper than the Fab Five. since then, but that doesn't mean those guys have ended up as good as a Fab Five. It's just like you take it for what it's worth. It's very impressive what they've done. It's not something. At some point, you're going to miss on evaluations.
Yeah.
Guys aren't. You're going to recruit a group 1 year that 6 or 7 of the kids aren't going to pan out. It's a numbers game.
Yeah, but also like we talk about too. I mean, especially in college football, there's so many different intangibles that go along with that. Kids' work ethic, his ability to pick up the system and learn, his ability to adjust to a new situation. He's, now these guys are coming from being the man into coming into a program that they're just gonna have to conform into the culture of the team. You don't know. I mean, there's a lot of. I agree with you, Fish. I mean, you make a very good point, but like I said, I would take Nick Saban's evaluation. I think their hit rate is remarkable, and I would say that 1 or 2 of those guys are going to probably end up in the NFL and be a first-round draft pick.
Yeah, well, you're probably right. I'm not going to argue. I mean,
yeah,
it's a useless argument. I'm just saying
history is on our side on this one.
Yeah, well,
history.
Well,
at least recent history is on our side on this one.
well.
Oh, God. We could do a whole pod on what's in the water in Alabama.
Hey, let's save the FSU stuff in Miami for next week.
All right, no problem.
Yeah, gives us something to talk about next week. Believe me, this was such a positive podcast. I'd hate to ruin it by FSU talk.
It was.
Hey, they landed a 5-star wide receiver out of Arkansas today. It may not last, but they did.
Who?
FSU pulled in like a 4 or 5-star receiver from Arkansas for the class of 2022. So you guys got to get excited about that. But finish it off, McKinley, with the.
Oh yeah. If you guys want to follow us, you can listen to us on Anchor, SoundCloud, Spotify, also on YouTube, as well as Apple Podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating and feedback. We love to hear from you guys. Thank you for your support.